I am Jacob, 24 years old, and my grandfather trusted me with $25,000 in cash. That money was a test of my responsibility, hidden carefully in my closet. Then one day my father found it. Instead of asking me about it, he spent every dollar on my sister Allison's wedding. I was devastated, but nothing could prepare me for the moment my grandfather walked in and asked the question that made my blood run cold. If you are watching this and have ever had family betray your trust, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe. The moment my grandfather walked in that day changed my family forever. My relationship with my family has always been complicated. My grandfather Warren practically raised me during my formative years. He would pick me up from school when my parents were too busy with work, teach me about responsibility, and show me what it meant to be a man of integrity. We bonded over baseball games, fishing trips, and his stories about building his construction business from nothing. Every summer I would spend weeks at his lakeside cabin learning practical skills and soaking up his wisdom about life and money. My father Robert, on the other hand, always seemed to favor my sister Allison. It was never anything obvious enough to complain about without sounding petty, but the pattern was clear over the years. When Allison needed a car for college, Dad bought her a brand new Honda. When I needed one 2 years later, I got a used Ford with over 100,000 miles on it. When Allison wanted to study abroad in Paris, my parents found the money. When I wanted to attend a summer program in Boston, I was told to save up myself. These small inequities accumulated over the years into a mountain of resentment that I tried my best to bury. My mother Patricia always tried to keep the peace, but her peacekeeping usually involved convincing me to let things go rather than addressing the favoritism. She would say things like, "Your sister just needs more support than you do," or "You are so independent, Jacob, we know you can handle things yourself." While meant as compliments, these statements only reinforced that I could not count on my parents the way Allison could. The wedding planning began about 6 months ago when Allison got engaged to her boyfriend of 2 years, Thomas. From the beginning, her expectations were extravagant. She wanted a destination wedding at a vineyard, a designer dress, gourmet catering, and professional everything. My parents initially tried to gently suggest more affordable options, but Allison would tear up and talk about how she had dreamed of this day her entire life. Somehow the budget kept expanding despite my father occasionally mentioning financial concerns. My own financial situation was tight but stable. I was working 30 hours a week at a local garage while finishing my mechanical engineering degree. Living at home was not ideal at 24, but it allowed me to save money and avoid student loans. I also picked up weekend gig work delivering packages and doing odd jobs for neighbors. Every dollar was accounted for in my budget, split between savings, tuition, and minimal personal expenses. I was proud of my work ethic and financial discipline traits my grandfather had instilled in me. Grandfather Warren built his construction company from a single truck and a toolbox to a regional business employing 50 people. Now retired, and in his 70s, he remained sharp as ever and continued to mentor me and other young people in the family. He believed in earning what you received and testing character through responsibility. Over the years, he had helped various family members with business investments, down payments on homes, and education costs, but only after they had demonstrated financial responsibility. His assistance was never a handout, but always structured as a lesson. The $25,000 came into my possession 3 months before the wedding. Grandfather invited me to lunch at his favorite diner where we always had our most important conversations. After catching up about my classes and work, he pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Jacob," he said in his gravelly voice, "I have always appreciated your work ethic and honesty. I want to entrust you with something important." Inside the envelope was $25,000 in cash, mostly $100 bills. Before I could speak, he raised his hand. "This is not a gift, not yet. It is a test of responsibility. I want you to keep this money safe for 3 months. Do not spend it. Do not tell anyone about it. Do not deposit it in a bank. Just keep it secure. After 3 months, we will talk about what this money might be used for in your future." I was stunned by both the amount and the trust this represented. When I asked why cash and why the secrecy, he simply said, "Sometimes the true test of character is what you do when no one is watching." And sometimes the true test of family is how they respect boundaries. I took this responsibility extremely seriously. At home, I created a hiding spot in my closet, removing a section of baseboard and hollowing out a space in the wall. I placed the money inside a waterproof container, sealed it, and concealed the hiding spot perfectly. No one would find it unless they were tearing the room apart. I checked on it weekly, not out of distrust for my family, but to ensure the hiding place remained secure and undisturbed. The pride I felt at being trusted with this responsibility was immense. For once, I felt recognized for the reliable, trustworthy person I had worked so hard to become. My grandfather saw something in me that my parents seemed to miss, and that validation meant everything to me. I was determined not to let him down. Every Sunday morning, while my family was at church, I would perform my ritual of checking on the money. I would carefully remove the baseboard, extract the container, count the cash to ensure it was all there, and then return everything exactly as it had been. This routine gave me a sense of security and accomplishment. 3 months seemed like a long time, but I was already halfway through the waiting period without incident. Then came the day that changed everything. I returned from a double shift at the garage to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. This immediately sent alarm bells ringing in my head because I always closed it completely. Entering cautiously, I surveyed the room. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but something felt off. My instincts were screaming that someone had been in here searching through my things. With my heart pounding, I went straight to the closet. The clothes were arranged slightly differently than how I had left them. I dropped to my knees and examined the baseboard hiding spot. My stomach dropped when I noticed slight scratch marks around the edges that had not been there before. With trembling hands, I removed the section of baseboard. The hollow space was empty. The container with $25,000 was gone. No, 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 I whispered frantically, searching deeper into the space as if the money might have somehow shifted further back. Nothing. I tore through my closet, throwing clothes and shoes aside, hoping that maybe I had moved the money to another spot and forgotten. Deep down, I knew this was not the case. After the initial panic subsided, I needed to figure out who had taken it. I started with my mother, finding her in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Trying to keep my voice casual, I asked if she had been in my room for any reason. "No, honey. Why would I need to go in there?" she replied, giving me a curious look. Her confusion seemed genuine, and my mother had never been a good actress. Next, I tried to track down my sister. Allison was out with her fiancé Thomas, according to Mom, but would be back for dinner. I waited impatiently, pacing around the house, and trying to think of who else could have discovered the money. When my father returned from work, his behavior immediately struck me as suspicious. He avoided eye contact when greeting me, and seemed unusually interested in the mail. When I directly asked if he had been in my room, his response was defensive. "Why are you interrogating everyone? If you have something valuable, you should put it in the bank like a responsible adult," he snapped, then quickly changed the subject to ask Mom about dinner. That evening at dinner, I watched my family carefully. Mom was normal, chatting about her day at the elementary school where she taught. Allison arrived bubbling with excitement about wedding details, including a surprise upgrade to their venue package. My father remained quiet but kept glancing at Allison with what looked like relief whenever she mentioned the wedding plans. After dinner, I overheard a conversation between Dad and Allison in the living room that confirmed my suspicions. "The vineyard owner was so accommodating when we increased our budget," Allison was saying. "The fountain display during the reception is going to be beautiful." "I am just glad we could make it work," my father replied. "Your special day should be everything you dreamed of." "Where did the extra money come from anyway?" Allison asked. "Last month you and Mom were worried about even affording the basic package." There was a pause before my father answered vaguely. "Sometimes opportunities present themselves when you need them most. Do not worry about it, Princess." The next day I found wedding vendor receipts in the trash. The dates on them were recent, and the amounts were substantial. The vineyard deposit alone was $15,000, with another $5,000 for the catering upgrade and various smaller expenses that perfectly accounted for the missing $25,000. My father, who had been stressed and short-tempered about money for months, was suddenly relaxed and generous about wedding expenses. When Allison mentioned adding a chocolate fountain to the dessert table, an extra $800, he waved his hand dismissively and said, Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." The evidence was overwhelming, but I still could not believe my father would steal from me. I tried several times to talk to him privately. Once I approached him in the garage while he was organizing his tools. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," I began. "Can it wait, Jacob?" "I promised your mother I would fix the fence this weekend," he replied without looking at me. "It is about some money that was in my room. A significant amount." At this, he finally turned, his expression hardening. "Money? What money are you doing? Something illegal?" "No, of course not. It was given to me by Grandfather Warren." "Your grandfather gave you money without telling me." His tone became angry. "How much money?" $25,000, I admitted. "He asked me to keep it safe as a kind of test." My father laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A test? That sounds like one of Warren's manipulative games. Listen, son, if your grandfather wanted to help this family, he should have given that money to me, not sneak it to you behind my back." "But Dad, the money is gone. Someone took it from my hiding place." His face flushed red. "Are you accusing me of stealing? Is that what this conversation is about?" "I just want to know what happened to it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe there never was any money. Maybe you spent it yourself, and now you are trying to blame someone else. Or maybe your grandfather never gave it to you in the first place," he said, turning back to his tools. "This conversation is over." Each attempt at confrontation ended similarly, with deflection, denial, or outright hostility. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. My father had invaded my privacy, stolen something entrusted to me, and then gaslit me when confronted. The man who should have been teaching me about integrity was demonstrating its opposite. As the wedding date approached, my anxiety grew. Grandfather Warren would be returning from his extended vacation in Arizona just in time for the ceremony. The 3-month period would be up, and he would expect me to have kept my promise. How could I explain that I had failed his test so completely? In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I watched in silent horror as my sister's celebration transformed from an already expensive affair into something truly extravagant. The original venue, a local country club, was suddenly not quite right, and Allison announced they had secured Pine Ridge Vineyard instead, a picturesque estate that typically hosted celebrities and wealthy executives. The upgrade cost an additional $12,000, almost half of the stolen money right there. The catering changed from a respected local company to a renowned chef who specialized in farm-to-table cuisine with wine pairings for each course. The floral arrangements expanded from simple elegance to elaborate displays, featuring out-of-season blooms imported from South America. Allison selected a designer dress that cost $5,000, replacing the one she had initially chosen for $2,000. My father nodded approvingly at each escalation, his previous concerns about cost conspicuously absent. I attempted to reason with my sister one afternoon while she was addressing invitations at the dining room table. "Allison, can I ask you something about the wedding?" I said, taking a seat across from her. "Sure, but make it quick. I have 50 more of these to finish today," she replied without looking up. "All these upgrades and changes, they seem really sudden. Where is the money coming from?" This got her attention. She put down her pen and looked at me curiously. "Dad said he found some extra money. Why do you care? Are you jealous or something?" "I am not jealous," I said carefully. "I am concerned. Until very recently, Dad was stressed about affording even the basics for your wedding. Now suddenly money is no object." Allison rolled her eyes. "Maybe he got a bonus at work. Maybe he took out a loan. Maybe Grandpa Warren helped out. Why are you trying to ruin this for me? This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life." "Did Dad specifically say Grandpa Warren gave him money for the wedding?" I pressed. "No, but it would make sense. Grandpa loves me too, you know. The world does not revolve around you and your special relationship with him." She picked up her pen again, signaling the end of our conversation. My mother was equally unhelpful. When I cornered her in the laundry room and expressed my concerns, she became visibly uncomfortable. "Jacob, honey, finances are complicated. Your father handles our money, and if he says we can afford these things for your sister, then we can afford them. But Mom, what if the money came from somewhere it should not have? She paused, folding a towel with excessive precision. What exactly are you suggesting? When I explained about the $25,000 grandfather had entrusted to me, her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. That sounds like a misunderstanding. Your father would never take something that did not belong to him, especially not from his own son. Perhaps you miscounted, or perhaps you are confused about how much there was to begin with. Despite her words, I could see the doubt in her eyes. She knew my father was capable of justifying almost anything when it came to providing for Allison. Desperate to fix the situation before my grandfather discovered the theft, I took on additional work, picking up every available shift at the garage and finding odd jobs around town. I sold my gaming console, my collection of rare vinyl records, and even my laptop, replacing it with a much cheaper model. I took out a cash advance on my credit card despite the exorbitant interest rate. After 3 weeks of this extreme effort, I had managed to save up just over $6,000. It was impressive, but not nearly enough to replace what had been taken. The mathematics of the situation were implacable. Even if I continued at this pace, I would have at most $8,000 by the wedding day. The remaining $17,000 might as well have been $17 million, for all my ability to replace it in time. The weight of this failure pressed down on me constantly. I had trouble sleeping often, lying awake, calculating and recalculating how much money I could make in the remaining time. I lost weight because food had become tasteless. My performance at work and school began to suffer as my anxiety mounted. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations continued at a frantic pace. Allison was constantly on the phone with vendors, making last-minute adjustments and additions. My father threw himself into tasks like coordinating with the photographer and videographer, arranging transportation for out-of-town guests, and selecting premium spirits for the open bar. When the wedding invitations went out, I noticed they had been upgraded too, from simple cardstock to thick textured paper with gold foil accents and custom wax seals. Another unnecessary expense that likely came from my stolen money. The weekend before the wedding, my parents hosted an extravagant rehearsal dinner at an upscale steakhouse. The private room, open bar, and multi-course meal for 30 people must have cost at least $3,000. I sat through the event in a fog, pushing food around my plate and offering weak smiles when appropriate. My father gave a tearful toast about giving his little girl the wedding she deserved, no matter what it took. The irony of his words made me feel physically ill. That night, I tried one last time to address the situation with my father. I found him in his study reviewing seating arrangements for the reception. "Dad, Grandfather Warren is coming back tomorrow for the wedding," I said without preamble. "Yes, I know. He is staying at the Marriott because we do not have room here with all the wedding guests," he replied, not looking up from his papers. He gave me $25,000 to keep safe as a test, the exact amount that mysteriously appeared for Allison's wedding upgrades. My father finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of anger and something else, fear perhaps. "We have been through this already. I do not know anything about your money. Maybe you should ask yourself if you actually deserve that kind of trust from your grandfather. He is going to ask me about it." I continued, my voice breaking slightly. What am I supposed to tell him? For a moment, something like shame flickered across my father's face, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "Tell him whatever you want. But remember, if you try to cause drama at your sister's wedding with wild accusations, you will be the one who looks bad, not me." As he turned back to his seating charts, I realized this conversation, like all the others, was going nowhere. The wedding was 2 days away, my grandfather would be arriving tomorrow, and I was completely out of options. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly perfect weather for what I knew would be a disaster. I had barely slept, rehearsing over and over what I would say to my grandfather when he inevitably asked about the money. Should I lie to protect my father? Should I tell the truth and potentially ruin my sister's wedding? There seemed to be no good options. Our house was chaotic by 7 a.m., with my mother rushing around organizing last-minute details, while my father loaded supplies into his SUV. Allison had stayed overnight at a hotel with her bridesmaids, following the tradition of the groom not seeing the bride before the wedding. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Pine Ridge Vineyard, with photographs beforehand and the reception immediately following. Jacob, are you ready? My mother called up the stairs. We need to leave for the venue in 30 minutes. I adjusted my tie in the mirror, noting the dark circles under my eyes. My rented tuxedo fit well enough, but I felt like an imposter wearing it. How could I participate in this celebration knowing it was built on theft and deception? As I descended the stairs, my father glanced at me and frowned. You look terrible. Did you sleep at all? Not really, I admitted. Been thinking about a lot of things. Well, pull yourself together. This is your sister's day, and I will not have you bringing everyone down with your mood. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My father checked his watch, looking confused. Who could that be? We are not expecting anyone here. My mother opened the door, and I heard her surprised exclamation. Warren, we thought you were meeting us at the venue. My blood ran cold. Grandfather was not supposed to be here yet. I had expected to have a few more hours to prepare myself. Thought I would surprise you, came my grandfather's familiar, gravelly voice. Figured you might need an extra pair of hands this morning. He stepped into the foyer looking exactly as he had 3 months ago when he had entrusted me with the money. Tall and straight despite his 70 years, with a full head of silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He was already dressed in his best suit, a vintage 3-piece that he reserved for the most special occasions. Jacob, my boy, he said warmly, pulling me into a firm embrace. Good to see you. You look like you have been working too hard. Good to see you too, Grandpa. I managed my voice sounding strangled even to my own ears. He kept his arm around my shoulders as he greeted my father with a handshake. Robert, everything ready for the big day? As ready as we will ever be, my father replied with a forced smile. It is going to be quite an event. I bet it will be. Allison always did have expensive taste, Grandfather remarked with just a hint of disapproval in his tone. He had always been more impressed by practicality than extravagance. We moved to the living room where my mother offered coffee and pastries. The conversation remained light, focused on wedding details and family members who would be attending. I sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa waiting for the inevitable question. My father seemed equally tense, checking his phone repeatedly and mentioning the time every few minutes. Finally, as we were about to leave for the venue, Grandfather turned to me with a smile. Almost forgot the real reason I wanted to stop by early. It has been 3 months, Jacob. Son, where is the money I gave you to keep safe? The room went silent. My mother looked confused, glancing between me and my grandfather. My father, who had been checking his watch again, froze, his face draining of color. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The moment I had dreaded was here, and I was paralyzed. Jacob, Grandfather prompted, his smile fading as he sensed something was wrong. The $25,000. Our arrangement. My father suddenly became very interested in gathering up the coffee cups, keeping his back to us. My mother's confusion deepened. Warren, what money are you talking about? She asked. I gave Jacob $25,000 3 months ago to hold for me. A test of responsibility. Grandfather explained, his eyes never leaving my face. Today is when we discuss what happens with it next. The silence stretched painfully until I finally found my voice. Grandpa, the money. It is gone. Gone, he repeated, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. What do you mean, gone? Someone took it from my hiding place, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandfather's expression hardened. Who took it, Jacob? I could not bring myself to directly accuse my father. Instead, I said, it disappeared about a month ago, right around the time the wedding budget suddenly expanded. All eyes turned to my father, who had gone completely still facing away from us. Slowly, he turned around, his face ashen. Robert, Grandfather's voice was dangerously quiet. Do you know something about this? My father swallowed hard, then attempted a dismissive laugh that came out more like a cough. This is ridiculous. We need to get to the venue. We can discuss this later. We will discuss it now, Grandfather said firmly. Did you take money from Jacob's room? After a moment of tense silence, my father's posture changed defiance, replacing his initial shock. Yes, I found the money, but I was going to pay it back. It was just borrowing, not stealing. Robert, my mother gasped. What was I supposed to do? My father continued, his voice rising. Allison's wedding was coming up and we were short on funds. Then I find out my father gave my son $25,000 in secret money that could have helped our whole family. Grandfather's face darkened. That money was not yours to take. It was entrusted to Jacob specifically. Why him and not me? My father demanded. I am your son, Jacob. Is just a kid who lives in my house. If anyone deserved that money, it was me to help give my daughter the wedding she deserves. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of the wedding planner, who knocked enthusiastically on our front door. My mother answered automatically, her face still showing shock from the revelations. Good morning, Matthew's family. The big day is here. The planner, Melissa, breezed in with a clipboard and a bright smile that quickly faltered as she sensed the tension in the room. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay, Grandfather said bluntly. It seems my son has stolen $25,000 from my grandson to pay for today's extravaganza. Melissa's smile disappeared completely. Oh, I see. Should I wait outside? That would be best, my mother said quietly. After the planner retreated, my father turned on me with fury in his eyes. Are you happy now, Jacob? You had to bring this up today of all days. You could not wait until after your sister's wedding. I did not bring it up, I defended myself. I have been trying to talk to you about this for weeks and you refused. Both of you stop, Grandfather commanded. He turned to my father. Robert, you had no right to take that money. It was not a gift to Jacob, not yet. It was a test for him, one that you ruined. And now you have the audacity to blame him for your theft. It was not theft, my father insisted. It was redistributing family resources where they were needed most. Allison needed that money for her special day. Jacob was just hoarding it. I was doing exactly what Grandpa asked me to do, I shouted, years of resentment finally boiling over. But you never thought about that, did you? It has always been Allison first with me as an afterthought. The sound of a car door slamming outside momentarily distracted us. Through the window, I could see my sister emerging from a car still in regular clothes, presumably coming to collect something before going to get ready at the venue. The front door opened and Allison walked in freezing when she saw all of us standing tensely in the living room. What is going on? Why is everyone still here? We need to be at the venue like right now. Ask Dad where the money for your vineyard wedding came from, I said bitterly. Allison looked confused. What are you talking about? Grandfather stepped forward. Your father took $25,000 that I had given Jacob to keep safe. He used it to pay for your wedding upgrades without permission from either of us. Allison's hand flew to her mouth. Dad, is that true? My father's anger seemed to deflate somewhat in the face of his daughter's shock. I was trying to give you the wedding you always wanted, Princess. The money was just sitting there doing nothing. So my dream wedding is paid for with stolen money. Allison's voice rose hysterically. From my own brother. How could you do that? It was not stealing, my father insisted again. Jacob is part of this family. What benefits one of us, benefits all of us. That is not how trust works, Robert, Grandfather said severely. That money represented something important between Jacob and me. You had no right to interfere. The wedding planner poked her head back in, looking extremely uncomfortable. I really hate to interrupt, but if we do not leave now, we will miss our time slot for the venue setup. Chaos erupted as everyone began talking at once. My mother tried to mediate, suggesting we postpone this discussion until after the wedding. My father insisted we all just get in the cars and deal with it later. Allison was in tears, repeating that her wedding was ruined before it even began. Grandfather stood firm, saying that accountability could not be postponed for convenience. In the midst of this, my sister's fiancé Thomas arrived, confused by the delay and the obvious tension. When Allison tearfully explained the situation, he looked shocked and then angry. You funded our wedding with stolen money, he asked my father incredulously. Sir, with all due respect, that is completely unacceptable. Not you too, my father groaned. Look, everyone needs to calm down. We have a wedding to get to. How can we proceed with a wedding built on theft? Thomas asked, putting his arm around Allison. What kind of foundation is that for our marriage? As the argument continued, guests began arriving at the house having misunderstood the meeting location. The small groups of confused relatives and friends on our front lawn added to the surreal quality of the morning. What should have been a joyous occasion had devolved into a family reckoning that none of us were prepared for. Against all odds, and after much heated discussion, the wedding did proceed that day, though in a form much altered from the original plan. Grandfather Warren, always practical, even in his anger, recognized that hundreds of guests were already en route and thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits had been paid. He proposed a compromise. The ceremony would go forward, but he would publicly announce that he was retroactively funding the wedding as a gift to the couple, legitimizing the source of the money. The solution was imperfect, but it allowed the day to continue without completely destroying my sister's special moment. Grandfather made it clear, however, that this solution came with the condition that my father would work to repay him every dollar over the next year. The ceremony itself was beautiful but subdued. The vineyard setting, with its rolling hills and flowering vines, provided a picturesque backdrop that almost made you forget the morning's revelations. Almost. The tension was palpable beneath the surface, as family members performed their roles mechanically, smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I stood at the altar as one of the groomsmen, watching my sister and Thomas exchange vows about honesty and trust that now seemed tragically ironic. My father walked Allison down the aisle with a stiff smile, avoiding eye contact with grandfather, who sat stoically in the front row. My mother dabbed at tears that I suspected were not entirely happy ones. The reception that followed was equally strained. The lavish decorations, gourmet food, and premium open bar that had cost so much more than originally planned now seemed tainted. Guests who were unaware of the morning's drama commented on how beautiful everything was, unknowingly twisting the knife with each compliment. Allison and Thomas left the reception early, around 9 p.m., instead of the planned midnight conclusion. They thanked everyone for coming, made excuses about their early flight for their honeymoon, and slipped away. I noticed they barely spoke to our father before departing. With the bride and groom gone, the remaining guests began to leave in greater numbers. By 10:30, only immediate family and a few close friends remained, picking at leftover cake and making awkward small talk. My father had retreated to a corner table with a glass of scotch, while my mother moved between groups, trying desperately to maintain some semblance of festivity. Grandfather found me sitting alone on the vineyard's terrace, staring out at the illuminated grapevines. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, lowering himself onto the bench beside me. "Of course not," I replied, making room for him. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the muted music still playing inside. "I am sorry, Grandpa," I finally said. "I failed your test. I should have found a better hiding place or told you when I first suspected the money was gone." He turned to face me, surprise evident in his expression. "Jacob, you did not fail anything. This was not your fault. But I was responsible for keeping the money safe. That was the whole point, right?" Grandfather sighed deeply. "The point was to see if you could be trusted with responsibility, and you proved that you could. You did everything right. What happened was not a failure on your part, but a betrayal by someone who should have respected boundaries." "You are not disappointed in me?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Not in the slightest," he assured me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "If anything, I am more impressed with you now than before. You tried to make it right, tried to earn back the money, tried to address the situation directly with your father. Those actions show character." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by confusion. Then, why the test at all? What was the point of the $25,000? Grandfather looked thoughtful. "The money was a test, yes, but not just for you. It was a test for your entire family, though they did not know it. I wanted to see how they would respect something entrusted to you specifically." "That seems a bit manipulative," I said hesitantly. He chuckled. "Perhaps it was. But I've been around long enough to know that people do not always show their true colors in everyday situations. Sometimes you need to create circumstances that reveal character." "And my father failed the test," I said quietly. "Your father made a serious mistake," Grandfather corrected. "But people can learn from their mistakes if they are willing to face them honestly." Inside the reception hall, I could see my mother trying to convince my father to leave. He seemed resistant, gesturing toward us on the terrace with his drink. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on a lot of things," grandfather replied. "Mainly on whether your father is willing to make amends not just financially, but by acknowledging the damage he has done to trust within this family." The following weeks were incredibly difficult. My father avoided being home as much as possible, leaving early for work and returning late. When he was home, he was distant and defensive. My mother tried desperately to mediate, suggesting family dinners that inevitably devolved into tense silence or passive-aggressive comments. Allison and Thomas returned from their honeymoon 2 weeks after the wedding. Rather than the glowing, relaxed newlyweds we expected, they seemed stressed and subdued. Allison called me the day after they got back, asking to meet for coffee without our parents. At the cafe, she fidgeted with her new wedding ring, avoiding my eyes. "I wanted to apologize," she finally said. "I had no idea about the money." "I know you did not," I assured her. "Still, I feel horrible. My wedding was paid for with money stolen from you. Every time I look at the photos, all I can think about is how it was all built on a lie." "The money was not technically mine yet," I said, trying to ease her guilt. "It was Grandpa's test." Allison shook her head. "That does not make it better. Dad should never have taken it, regardless of whose it was." She hesitated, then added, "Thomas and I have been talking. We are thinking of paying back our portion of the money, at least what was spent on the wedding." I was surprised by this offer. "You do not have to do that. Grandpa already worked something out with Dad." "It is not about obligation," she insisted. "It is about doing what is right. Besides, I cannot stand knowing that every time you look at me, you are thinking about how Dad always favored me, even to the point of stealing for me." This conversation was the first step toward healing the rift between my sister and me. While we had never been especially close, the shared experience of our father's betrayal created a new kind of bond. For the first time, Allison was seeing the pattern of favoritism that had shaped our family dynamics for years. A month after the wedding, my mother organized a family dinner, insisting that everyone attend, including Grandfather Warren. The atmosphere was awkward. As we all took our places around the dining table, no one quite sure what to say. After serving the meal, my mother cleared her throat. "I think we need to talk about what happened. We cannot go on like this, pretending everything is fine when it clearly is not." My father stared down at his plate. "What is there to talk about? I made a mistake. I am paying Warren back. End of story." "It is not that simple," Robert grandfather said firmly. "Money can be repaid. Trust is harder to rebuild." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. My father initially tried to justify his actions again, claiming he had only been thinking of the family's happiness. But when confronted with the hurt he had caused, especially to me, he finally began to see the situation from another perspective. "I guess I never really thought about how it would make you feel, Jacob," he admitted reluctantly. "I was so focused on giving Allison her perfect day that I convinced myself taking the money was justifiable." "And what about the fact that you have always put Allison first?" I asked, voicing the resentment that had built up over years. This was just the most extreme example of a pattern that has existed my entire life. My father looked genuinely surprised. "That is not true. I love both of you equally." "Your actions have not shown that," my mother said quietly. "I have seen it too, Robert. Little inequities, different standards, different levels of support. I should have said something years ago." As difficult as it was, that dinner marked the beginning of a long process of family reconciliation. My father's initial apology was incomplete and somewhat defensive, but it was a start. There would be many more conversations, some productive, and others frustrating, as we all worked to rebuild what had been broken. The real turning point came unexpectedly about 2 months after the wedding. I was working late at the garage when my father showed up, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Do you have a minute to talk?" he asked, hanging back by the entrance. I wiped my hands on a shop towel and nodded. "Sure. Let me tell my boss I am taking a break." We walked outside to the small picnic table where employees usually ate lunch. The autumn evening was cool, the sun already setting behind the buildings across the street. I have been doing a lot of thinking, my father began awkwardly, and I owe you a real apology. Not the half-hearted ones I have been giving, but a genuine acknowledgement of how wrong I was. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Taking that money was inexcusable. I violated your privacy, betrayed your trust, and then tried to justify it, instead of admitting I was wrong. He took a deep breath. But worse than that, I have been thinking about what you and your mother said about favoring Allison. At first I wanted to deny it, but the more I reflected on the past, the more examples I could see. This level of self-awareness was new for my father. I had never heard him speak so honestly about his own shortcomings. Why do you think you did that? I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. He thought for a moment. Allison was always more. I do not know demonstrative about her needs. She would cry or get upset, and I would rush to fix whatever was wrong. You were always so self-sufficient, even as a little kid. I think I mistook your independence for not needing me as much. I did need you, Dad, I said quietly. I just learned not to show it because the response was never the same as when Allison asked for something. He winced at this truth. I see that now, and I am so sorry, Jacob. I failed you as a father in many ways. What made you come to this realization? I asked. Your grandfather, actually. He has been meeting with me weekly, supposedly to discuss the repayment plan, but really to make me face what I did. He can be pretty relentless when he wants to be. My father smiled slightly. He made me see that this was not just about the money, but about respect, trust, and treating my children equally. That conversation was the first of many healing interactions between my father and me. He had taken a second job on weekends to accelerate his repayment to grandfather, which meant I saw him less, but when we did see each other, our interactions had a new honesty and mutual respect. Allison and Thomas also became part of the healing process. Despite my objections, they insisted on contributing toward repaying grandfather, saying it was important for their own peace of mind. Thomas, who came from a family that valued direct communication, often facilitated difficult conversations when tensions arose. My mother found her voice in a way I had never seen before. Where once she had always defaulted to keeping the peace at any cost, she now spoke up when she saw old patterns emerging. She became an active participant in reshaping our family dynamics rather than a passive observer. I enabled your father's behavior for years, she admitted to me during a private conversation. I saw the favoritism but told myself it was not my place to interfere. I was wrong, and I am sorry, Jacob. 3 months after the wedding incident, I made a significant decision with my grandfather's support. Using some of the money he had originally intended to give me after the test, I put a deposit on a small apartment closer to campus. Moving out of my parents' home was both practical for my studies and symbolic of a new independence. The day I moved, my father helped carry boxes and furniture. As we assembled my bed frame, he said something that surprised me. I am proud of you, son. Not just for your hard work or your grades, but for how you have handled this whole situation with more maturity than I showed. You are becoming a fine man, and I can take very little credit for that. That is not entirely true, I replied after a moment. You taught me plenty, even if some lessons were about what not to do. He laughed ruefully. Fair enough. I hope I am teaching better lessons now. My grandfather visited my new apartment the following weekend, bringing a houseplant and a toolbox as housewarming gifts. As we sat in my sparsely furnished living room drinking coffee, he seemed pleased. This is good, Jacob. Your own space on your own terms. I could not have done it without your help, I acknowledged. Nonsense. You would have gotten here eventually with or without me. I just helped speed things along. He set down his coffee cup. There is something I want to tell you. The $25,000 was always meant for you, not just as a test. What do you mean? The test was real, but the end result was predetermined if you passed. That money was intended to help you start your life after graduation, whether for advanced education, starting a business, or whatever you chose. I just wanted to make sure you were ready for the responsibility. And was I? Even though the money was taken, grandfather nodded firmly. You were. How you handled the loss proved that even more than if nothing had gone wrong. Character is revealed in adversity, not comfort. 6 months after the wedding, my father completed his repayment to grandfather ahead of schedule thanks to his second job and contributions from Allison and Thomas. To mark the occasion, grandfather invited the entire family to dinner at his home. After the meal, my father stood up looking nervous but resolved. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Warren, thank you for giving me the opportunity to make amends both financially and otherwise. Jacob, thank you for your forgiveness, which I am still working to earn. Allison and Thomas, thank you for your generosity and understanding." He turned to my mother. "And Patricia, thank you for standing up for what is right, even when that meant standing up to me. I am a better man because of it." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope which he handed to me. "This is a copy of a receipt for a bank account I have opened in your name. It contains $25,000 separate from what I repaid to your grandfather. This represents my commitment to treating my children equally and acknowledging the special milestone of your upcoming graduation." I was speechless, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. My father had truly understood the deeper issues at play and was taking concrete steps to address them. "Thank you, Dad," I said, simply unable to find more eloquent words in the moment. "You do not need to thank me for what should have been yours all along," he replied. "Just know that I am trying to be better to be the father you deserve." As we left grandfather's house that evening, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in our family. The painful revelation at the wedding had forced us to confront long-standing issues that might otherwise have festered indefinitely. While the process had been difficult, the result was a family dynamic built on greater honesty, respect, and equality. 1 year after the wedding incident that had so dramatically altered our family, we gathered at my apartment to celebrate my college graduation. I had completed my mechanical engineering degree with honors and had already accepted a position with a respected firm in the city. The changes in our family were subtle but significant. My father, true to his word, had worked hard to rebuild trust and treat his children equally. He still occasionally slipped into old patterns, but now recognized and corrected himself, often with gentle reminders from my mother. Their relationship had evolved too, becoming more balanced as my mother continued to assert herself rather than simply keeping the peace. Allison and Thomas had settled into married life and were expecting their first child. My relationship with my sister had deepened considerably. Where once we had been distant, connected only by family obligation, we now had regular sibling dinners and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "It is strange," Allison remarked during one such dinner. "If Dad had never taken that money, we might never have addressed all these issues. We would have just continued with the same dysfunctional patterns indefinitely." "Sometimes it takes a crisis to force change," Thomas added, "though I would have preferred a less dramatic one for our wedding day." My own healing journey had been complex. The initial pain and betrayal had cut deep, affecting my ability to trust not just my father but others in my life. For several months I found myself constantly checking and rechecking things, afraid of being taken advantage of again. With encouragement from grandfather, I had started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and trust issues. Dr. Laurel helped me process my feelings of betrayal without allowing them to define my future relationships. She introduced me to techniques for setting healthy boundaries while still remaining open to connection. "Trust is not an all-or-nothing proposition," she had explained in one particularly insightful session. "You can trust people in some areas while being cautious in others. The goal is not blind trust, but informed trust." Grandfather Warren had played a crucial role in everyone's healing process. His wisdom and steady presence provided an anchor when emotions threatened to overwhelm us. He never shied away from difficult conversations, but always approached them with compassion rather than judgment. During a fishing trip, 6 months after the incident, he shared something that changed my perspective significantly. "You know, Jacob, your father made a serious mistake, but in some ways he was set up to fail." "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised by this take. I raised him with very rigid ideas about a father's role as provider and protector. In his mind, ensuring Allison had her dream wedding was fulfilling that role. His methods were wrong, but his motivation came partly from values I instilled in him. Grandfather cast his line into the lake thoughtfully. I sometimes wonder if I had been more balanced in my teaching, if I had emphasized emotional support as much as financial provision, whether things might have been different. This recognition that even my grandfather, whom I had always seen as infallible, could reflect on his own parenting mistakes, gave me a more nuanced view of my father's actions. It did not excuse what he had done, but helped me understand it in the context of generational patterns. My father had his own revelations to share. During a Saturday morning when we were working together on restoring an old motorcycle, a project we had started as a way to rebuild our relationship, he opened up about his own journey. "I have been seeing someone too. A counselor," he admitted somewhat sheepishly. "It has been helpful to understand why I always favored Allison. It was not really about loving her more." "What was it about?" I asked, genuinely curious. He thought for a moment as he tightened a bolt. "Partly it was about feeling needed. Allison made it clear when she needed something, and fixing her problems made me feel important, necessary. With you, I never got that same feeling because you solved your own problems. And now I understand that being a good father is not just about solving problems or providing things. It is about recognizing each child's unique needs and respecting them as individuals." He looked up from the motorcycle. "I am still learning, but I am trying." The financial lessons from this experience were equally profound. Money in families is never just about dollars and cents, but about values, power, and trust. When my father took the money from my closet, he was not just taking cash, but also taking my agency and betraying the trust placed in me. Through discussions with grandfather, I came to understand that financial boundaries are essential even within families. Being related to someone does not grant automatic access to their resources. Each family member deserves financial autonomy, appropriate to their age and situation. As our graduation celebration wound down with plates of half-eaten cake scattered around my living room and family members engaged in comfortable conversation, grandfather pulled me aside onto my small balcony. "I am proud of you, Jacob," he said simply. "Not just for your degree or your new job, but for how you have handled this past year. You found a way to forgive without forgetting to rebuild relationships, without sacrificing your self-respect." "I had a good teacher," I replied, bumping his shoulder lightly with mine. He smiled. "We all did. Sometimes life teaches the hardest but most valuable lessons." Looking through the sliding glass door at my family, I realized that while the betrayal had been painful, the growth that came from it was priceless. My father was more self-aware and equitable. My mother was more assertive. My sister was more considerate. And I was more confident in my boundaries while still being open to connection. The $25,000 that had caused so much trouble was long since repaid, but its true value had been in the painful but necessary family transformation it initiated. Trust once broken could indeed be rebuilt, but the new structure would always bear the marks of having been repaired. Those marks were not weaknesses, but reminders of the work and commitment required to maintain healthy relationships. As we move forward as a family, we do so with greater awareness of our patterns and pitfalls. We communicate more directly, address issues before they fester, and respect each other's boundaries. The wedding day crisis that I once thought would destroy us ultimately strengthened us in ways I could never have anticipated. If you have experienced a betrayal of trust within your family, know that healing is possible, though it requires honesty, effort, and time from all involved. The path forward is not about forgetting what happened, but about creating new patterns based on mutual respect and understanding. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone close to you? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family relationships can be healed even after serious breaches of trust. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most painful experiences.